All right, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for another space to the Internet of Value Foundation New York, episode 75, and for all of those who come and listen in the future. I really appreciate all of the minds who come in here and speak every day from the diverse amount of mindsets and perspectives that we get to speak with. I think this information was not only valuable today, but possibly hundreds of years in the future could be looked at as an audio file of some sort of importance. But I'm going to send some more invites out, see if we can get some more people in here. I changed the topics above earlier just because Vet seemed more on the not wanting to talk about side chains and maybe some XRP ledger stuff. So maybe we'll talk more about space travel and quantum processors and different types of microchips that are being not only produced today, but possibly futuristic ones. And so welcome. Anybody feel free to hit the request to come up if you guys would like to speak about anything on topic above or something that you have on the top of your mind for the time being before we start speaking.
You know me, I'm always excited about this space talk. So looking forward to the topic change. It has been a lot of side chains and hooks and Evernote talk the last 2 weeks. So it'll be a nice break.
Well, I could talk distributed ledger technology all day, every day.
I'm sure you could.
Yeah, also, excuse my quietness. I am preparing 2 burgers right now. I'm going to cook. Welcome up, Dazzling.
Jam, everyone. Yeah, I kind of I do dig the topic change. I did have a couple of questions, but they're not in a rush to be answered, so I'll leave them for another time. But I do have a warm up question though. If you're going to stick to space, why can't you see stars from a plane?
Sorry, I was just throwing the burgers on. What do you mean by why can't you see stars from a plane?
So when I was on a plane recently, it was getting quite late and the sun went down, and I'm looking out and I was like, why can't I see any stars? It just kind of baffled me.
There is a load of different questions. It could have been depending on the altitude you're in. You could have been going through a cloud without even realizing it, especially if it was dark outside. There would have been really no way for you to know. You just would have seen nothing. But you can definitely see stars from a plane. That you could see them more vibrant if you were looking at the moon or anything on a perfect night. It stinks that you're on a plane though, and you were looking, trying to see out though, and didn't see. Sorry, Jay. Go ahead. Welcome up.
No, it all comes down to light reflection and like reflection of light. So it all comes down to that, right? Because even though when you're there, there's still too much light that goes on the ozone layer, and that's what it blocks the light from the stars. So they're there. It's just a matter of like light and being able to see past that light shield kind of thing. That's pretty much what it is. Now I do have a question for the panel when you guys are ready.
I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense because during the day, you obviously can't see the stars, but they are still there, obviously. If you had some sort of, lens that you could see past all that, I'm sure you could. But obviously, this is why they do astronomy. Astronomers generally work right through the night because it makes it much easier to see. But I guess that does kind of make sense. I mean, if you're on the ground, though, and you're looking straight up, you just get a full visual of the stars. But it just seems that every time I'm up there, you look out when it's nighttime and you can't see anything. But then it kind of reminds me of looking at astronauts, doing their thing, and generally the footage behind them, you can't see anything either. So I found that fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say maybe a long time ago you weren't able to do astronomy other than really in the nighttime, but during the day, I mean, there is astronomy technically going on 24/7, 365, in the form of radio signals or X-rays and all gamma rays. There's a lot of different types of spectrums of information that could be picked up rather than just observing the light that we are able to view in the form of photons.
Hello, gentlemen
Welcome
and
back.
ladies.
Go ahead, speak, Jay. Well,
So this is my question that I want to propose to the panel, and I just want to make sure, see if I'm not clear. I can always clarify my explanation. But my thing is, yes, we want to get to space, but currently the rockets that we use, they're chemical powered rockets. So what can you see as an alternative energy source in order to put these rockets into space? And how can we use that if that, how can we get some sort of energy field in space in order to bring those rockets back? So that's my question right there. What's the propulsion? What's the energy? Where's it coming from?
oh, well, this is an excellent question. So, to be able to get into outer space, right? Typically today we strap you to a rocket and we launch you thousands of miles per hour with tremendous amount of G-force to get into outer space. Long term in the future, there are a couple different methodologies that could be developed, and some that are already being developed and utilized. One of them being more of a catapult, where the velocity or trajectory is built up inside of a machine that is turning the object at an increased amount of speed until launch, and that would be what would propel you or goods and materials to be launched into outer space. There, you know, my personal favorite option, and this is something we've spoken about pretty in depth in here, is something also considerably like a space elevator, right? Some sort of large megastructure that we could plant and strap to the Earth that, in the sense of bringing rockets up, right? Because this is where most of the fuel is spent. In the actual bringing the materials up, the fuels up, all of the resources that we use inside of the rockets could be brought up in a very low effort way after the structure is developed and built, and then once in outer space could be assembled and be put together modularly and then could be utilized. What are your thoughts on all of those? And Chris, feel free to jump in if you would like to.
When you said that, then it just reminded me about something, a program I watched years ago when they were talking about those types of problems and actually creating a lift into space. And they were talking about using like carbon nanotubes in order to be able to achieve it. And the whole point was it would be a cheap way of being able to get the resources that you needed into sort of an orbit, so that you reduce significant amount of the problems of getting to space, and you just have this kind of like, I don't know, because obviously carbon nanotubes have got the potential to be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do it with steel or anything like that. But when I was watching it, I was fascinated by the fact that there is a substance now that they think that might actually be doable with. I just wondered if that's progressed at all, because it must have been 10 years ago that I watched that program now.
Yeah, and I would say that this new mega material that we've seen just in starting to become industrialized in the last decade is something like graphene oxides and graphene itself. This material combined with thoughts of maybe something like an LK99. For those who don't know what LK99 is, it's a recent, I shouldn't say recent because it's really been known for publicly for a decade, that this possibility that this change in the material of the way that a particular metal, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head right now, because I am cooking. I really shouldn't be doing two things at once. It is is it lead? No, it's copper. Yeah, it's lead, right? Yeah. So the lead molecules actually are changed to copper bindings. The way that I'm gonna not talk about it too much until I'm looking at my notes again, because I wrote something specifically down that explains it well. It's a superconductor, though. The way that the material is, it's what we think that we've discovered is our first room temperature superconductor that we may have been able to produce. And I tried to explain it a little bit more in depth. Obviously, I don't know it enough myself personally, because it is still this unknown material that we have somewhat thinking that it's possible, but has not been materially tested enough to be publicly proven. But so think of something like that, right? As we have rail cars today, but you have this material like graphene that could be paired with something like an LK99 to build some sort of megastructure in that sense, or these nanotubes could be the use case for the actual movement of the objects that would be sucked in and transported up through the elevator. Let me finish cooking, and I'm gonna jump in and speak more about this. I am just a horrific multitasker. I don't know what it is with me. So go ahead and speak, Jay, if you would like to. I'd like to hear your thoughts on everything.
No, man. I just like how rockets go boom really fast. That's pretty much it, man. I'm in neuroscience, brother. I love the idea of going to space, but I'm gonna be very honest with you. I need to see at least 10,000 successful trips before I even get my butt into any chair that's going anywhere near the outer space, bro.
Yeah, no, it's about reliability and trust. I completely agree with you. And so this is one thing in particular why I believe that Elon Musk has been so vocal about the transporting of Starship from Earth to terrestrially to outer space over and over again, to try and kind of build this comfort for people to be able to start from a civilian standpoint, taking vacations and things like that. Just they start luxury wise, which we know we can go into like the first space habitats. Vast being one of them in particular from Jed McCaleb, planning to be launched around 2026, 2027. Something like $120,000 for a ticket could supply you and pay for your transport, not only transport, but training, getting you ready for the G-forces, transport into outer space to a space habitat, and then, 3 nights there, 2 day stay possibly, and then transport back. And these stations would be, low Earth orbit stations, and in the thought of, how we see people sometimes if you go farther enough into outer space, floating, right? The gases that would be pumped into the space habitat on top of it being Earth orbit would make it feel very similar to being in Earth. So not really that full 0G, but very, very close to it. Please, somebody else feel free to speak.
So I mean, I know we have the space hotels coming in orbit. How much further along would it take for the lunar hotels? And do you think it would be hotels first, or do you think it would be more colonization?
Colonization?
Or colonizing? Sorry, colonizing the moon.
No, colonization is a word, you're right, but it's just definitely not on the list of things that are profitable. And so maybe if you think of colonization from a private business standpoint of building a base on an asteroid or something that you're planning on mining, okay, maybe if you think of that as colonization, but in like the effort of taking our entire species on one big ship and like let's go live somewhere else, colonization, probably not, because there's no profit to be made in that initially, unless everyone plans on right, being some sort of indebted slave to you because you're providing some sort of transport. I would never see anything like that working, at least not.
So you
in
think it would be more of a skeleton crew that would be on the moon?
Skeleton crew. Yeah, how many ever people it took for a private business to do whatever they wanted to do. No more, no less.
I mean,
You
do you
know,
think it'd be more just getting the robotics up and going, and then just having a few people there to maintain them?
If you're planning on mining, makes a lot of sense.
Sierra, you are an emoji queen. Get up here.
Go ahead, Chris. Please feel free to jump in.
I just posed the question because, I mean, the idea of going to the moon is, I asked myself, would I go? Well, I don't know is the honest answer. Possibly, yeah. I mean, it'd be something that if you're into space and you love all that kind of stuff, then yeah, it's something I might potentially do. If it was even achievable realistically in my lifetime. However, the thought of living on the moon, I don't know what on earth would drive me to want to do that. I mean, you got to be realistic. If you live on the moon, basically you just live in a bubble. And what are you going to do there? What are you going to do on the moon that's different to what you could do here? You're just going to have most of your options are just going to be removed. So the idea of it sounds probably better than the practical reality would be, in my view. Now, if you're talking about going to another planet where you could just walk around on the ground and it was safe, like Earth, that's totally different. But to me, that's not even remotely realistic in my lifetime. So I don't know. Really, this is all about paving the way for, my children's 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 children. Maybe. But I don't see it in my lifetime. But if that's not right, then I would love to hear more about that. But I just don't see as how it's even remotely realistic.
Well, not living there, no. And unless the Earth was going to be hit by an asteroid, I don't see anybody doing any effort for us to try and mobilize to create some sort of secession of change like that. But it could also be very dangerous living there. You know, the radiation that hits the moon and the low G forces that our bones and all of the atoms that are binding together inside of us are not used to can create some pretty funky things in a long-term time span if left unchecked. And so, the base that would be built structural wise would have to replicate the same atmosphere and the same chemical base as we have on Earth today, and on top of that, provide the resources to be able to sustainably live out there. I agree when we talk about living on the moon. Probably not in our lifetimes, but bases on the moon and taking the resources from the moon. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense if there are things that could be useful to us. And I did not see who had their hand up though first.
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay, so one of the things that kind of we're going here is, yes, we're definitely going to make to space exploration, but one thing that we need to fix before we even get into outer space is some scientists have done the research, and literally it kind of shows that unfortunately telomeres in humans are shorter, and that kind of deals with our lifespan being shortened, right? So the physics behind it, and this is where I'm coming from, this is what I know, is unfortunately cosmic rates. They do have a variation of gamma rates as well as iron rates and whatnot, and that is going to be able to distort human DNA. So we need to find a way that it helps us internally to protect ourselves. So I believe we have to have some sort of medicine that can protect our DNA, because once we are exposed into the cosmic rays, that's when we can see damage into our nucleic DNA as well as the telomeres. So that's then the other thing. No, it's not just to get to space; it's about to be able to survive in space.
Wow, and you brought me to my next thing that I was actually going to speak on, Jay. So that's pretty incredible. Shelfers, though, please feel free to speak first, and then I'm going to speak on it.
I was just gonna throw out there, if there was something like an asteroid and it was more of like a life vest, or not life vest, like a oh my god, like a safety boat or whatever, safety shuttle. How long would we actually have to orbit or live off planet for our planet to recuperate, I guess? Or we've kind of gone so far with our environmental F up, taking the human element out of the equation, would it be like a 5 or 10 year kind of break to the ecosystem to allow it to kind of clean itself up, or do you think it would be a lot longer?
The answer is we don't know, and it's because there are way too many variables that could come into play. You could speak about one particular situation. We can try and make an estimated guess off of it, right? Like those in the ISS. Well, we know those who go to the ISS really can't stay up there for more than 12 months. I mean, I think they don't even have many astronauts that have stayed up there for close to a year, because when you get back down here, it takes a whole year of your life just getting back to being able to really walk normally. And you know so the question is like, well, did we create a space habitat that has created the same atmospheric pressure and a chemical assimilation that we have on Earth? Well, then maybe are we able to protect against the radiation in the same magnetic wave field that we could create around a ship that we have around the Earth? Okay, then theoretically you could survive in outer space forever, as long as an asteroid or some sort of star or something doesn't implode on you. So it's like, there's a lot of variables for sure. But to what Jay was saying, this thought, though, of us being able to go to outer space and to be able to do all of these things and then want to sustain some sort of habitat or mega structures in outer space, Dyson spheres beyond, things that a level 1 species would be able to produce. I think we're going to find it in not only protecting our DNA, but enhancing it in ways of a molecular or a chemical change in the form of minerals. And so what I mean by this is, I think in the long term, and I think this might prove out to be true if our species is able to survive long enough to see possibly others in this paradox, that mecha organic and mecha itself being mechanoid is actually the most efficient structures of atomic third dimensional sustained molecules that are able to traverse space and to survive and to technologically advance. And so I think, long term, mecha organoid in many different variable fashions is what we choose as a species to enable us to traverse space. And Chris, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
What's the correct emoji to use for head blown? You blow my mind, man, when you talk about this kind of stuff.
Well, I think there's nothing more important than being prepared for the possible future that could occur. And to what you were saying before, Chris, right? Maybe not in our lifetimes, but the interesting thing, I think, is if you plan to live for another 20 to 30 years, I think not only will we have an extended ability to have life itself last much longer in an organic format, but the ability to have you as a synaptics bridge all of the information you've ever been and felt and sustained, that experience be able to be transferred or stored, I think is already relatively possible. I mean, you look at a gram of DNA, there's about 112 petabytes worth of information storage wise that we could fit into a drive. And if you think about things like neuromorphic designs of chips, if we're able to replicate the same exact synaptics, electromagnetic frequencies that go going through your brain, in a mecha or silicon based format, I mean, you essentially could exist forever, my friend, in a third dimensional state, I should say, because you exist forever no matter what. And Warmth, welcome up, man. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Michio Kaku was on the Fareed Zakaria this Sunday, and he was talking about quantum computing and like how advanced it is and how close it's getting to working through the same way that like our neurons work in our brain. So like with that and AI combined, like there can be lots of solutions that will come really quickly. I, but I mean, I think the main impediment, and like, I mean, I agree that like, I don't think I'm gonna get to live on a, extraterrestrial body or whatever you call it, a planet or anything in space, but, but the impediment, in my opinion, of getting there is cooperation. And the militarization of space is uh, one of the big impediments. And like, I mean, a lot of people, when they think of like, well, can we colonize the moon? Just because you can throw things from the moon to Earth, and when it impacts the Earth, it's gonna have be more devastating than a hydrogen bomb. I mean that there's people who are thinking along lines of thought that are like so at odds with the way we need to be thinking. So I mean, like we can get there probably with um all kinds of things can happen. I mean, we're on the cusp of really big stuff. I mean, really big stuff is happening already. Even the way I'm talking to y'all is insane. But the way things can jump off and the potential that we have, there's just so much to believe in as far as our future. And a lot of it just is just going to come down to, can we just not kill ourselves, and like, I have to express my pessimism, because I really feel like the Fermi paradox is airtight, and you might you might correct me, but I really have a lot of pessimism because of the Fermi paradox, and that we're just going through with some kind of thing that we're it's just designed that we're not going to make it. But you know also, though, on the other hand, in the Kurzweil book, The Singularity, one thing he says is, maybe we're first. Maybe that's the answer. It's just maybe we're first. And I know we think of the universe as being very old, but in the time span that the universe is going, will exist, whether it's through like entropy through expansion, or whether it contracts or whatever. But it's like, um, you know, they say it's going to be like trillions of years. So we're only an infant into the age of the universe. So it seems believable that we could be, the head, the most advanced in the entire universe, which sounds incredible, but it's a possible answer to the Fermi paradox. Is that just they're not there yet? If Yeah, I see other hand up, but I just wanted to throw those thoughts out there.
No, and I really enjoyed them more than I'll definitely touch on some of them in a minute. Jay, though, go ahead and speak. Please feel free to, man.
Thank you, Dad. Mr. Warm, I got a question for you. Have you read the Miko Kaku's The God Equation book yet?
No, the only one I read was the I think it was called The Physics of the Impossible, and it was good though. Do you recommend that one, The God Equation?
Well, yeah, I was the reason why I led with that question is because I wanted to see if you read it, so that way we can discuss it, because this is something that it ties to everything that we're talking right now. Just because the whole idea is that when Newton proposed his theory of gravity, and relativity, he kind of was onto the beginning stages of this, but now with Miko, he has explained that the universe is made out of four essential forces, and those forces govern everything, regardless on this planet or 1,000 light years away. There's still going to be forces that are going to be the exact same, not in the exact same amount of force, but those four essential forces are always present. So we're talking about gravity, electromagnetism, and we're also talking about.
Strong force and weak force.
Thank you, my friend. So that's the point that I wanted to bring in. So if you have any more to add on to that, man, that'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about that in the physics of the impossible, and they teach that in high school science classes as well. Uh, I'm not, I haven't read the book that you're talking about in particular, but I mean, are you saying, because we live within the parameters of how those forces work, that that's going to be limitations to some of these fantasies or dreams?
No, what I'm saying is that we are at a very early stage, and as we get going with more research, which is what we need to be able to not fear the space. But now we kind of starting to understand and comprehend that there's different reactions, and it's not just all chemical reactions kind of thing. We also have gravity forces at action as well, right? So that's what, and there's also you got to account for like strong force as well as weak force, and that's what, and weak force is just pretty much the idea of decay kind of thing, right?
My understanding is that the the strong nuclear force is, what why atoms can have so much hollow space, but you can't stick your hand through a wall. And the weak nuclear force is the inner energy released when we split the atom and blow up an atomic bomb. But if anybody thinks I'm wrong, go ahead and correct me on that. But that's what I think.
No, just two different examples of how you were utilizing the weak force and the strong force. Like how we would utilize it today, right? If you think of a nuclear reactor, it's actually the exact opposite. We want a slow decay, right? Rather than an atomic bomb that has an extremely fast decay, which causes that that boom, right? That oomph. Um, but yeah, nonetheless, just different examples of how the utilization of these different patterns of forces of atomic signatures can be utilized, and to the Fermi paradox, which I very much so like, and Fermi discovered many of other things, right? The fermion being a huge thing in particle physics, but there are a lot of possibilities for the Fermi paradox. There is a possibility that we are just in a particular place in our galaxy, that we are in a pocket of or a cloud, you could think of it, of gaseous material, and this has actually shielded us or in our solar system from the rest of the galaxy that could be possibly trillions of different species that could exist out there. I mean, the number is really, it's right, it's astronomical when you start thinking about the possibilities. But you're also right. It also is a possibility that we are the only ones. I find that as not just strange, but in the thoughts of the realms of what we know to be possible, and then to look out and to think that there are possibilities that just build them on possibilities that 1,000 years ago they would have never thought that we had technology of quantum computing. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but that possibility, being this never ending possibility, who knows where we'll be 100 years from now. I think is just such a great magnitude mathematically that it's hard for me to agree that we are the only ones in this not only galaxy but universe.
So being in like a gaseous sphere, like you described, I mean, does that mean that those giant telescope things wouldn't be able to pick up radio waves from, because I mean that's the main thing is we don't hear anything.
Yeah, well, we've definitely gotten some radio signals. There was one, if I'm not mistaken, a couple years ago that was picked up that was just extremely strange. That lasted for something like 30 minutes or something, and has never been done or replicated again. It's pretty cool if you look it up. There was a documentary done on it. But yeah, I mean, there's it's a possibility. In the sense when I say gaseous, right? Don't think of a smog cloud that you can't see through because we can obviously see our surrounding galaxy, but almost something where it might inhibit others from wanting to travel to some part of that galaxy if there's no need to travel to that part of the galaxy, and so maybe we're in some sort of little oasis.
When they describe the laws of physics, and we have those four forces, and we have the limitation of the speed of light and conservation of matter and so forth, do they necessarily know that those same physical laws apply in dark matter and dark energy?
No, and this is one of the things that Einstein was left on towards the end of his career, and him being the real physicist that brought the thought of time into the equation, and the theory of relativity. This this notion mathematically. Yeah, it's I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Warmth. Sorry about that. I forgot
I'll
what
just,
I forgot what the question was.
oh, no, yeah, ask the question again, and then I'll go. Sorry.
No, you're
The
good.
the question was about the laws of physics as we know it. Are they necessarily applicable in dark matter and dark energy?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hey
All right.
guys.
And
I was just gonna say I was on this listening to this
welcome,
NASA
George.
Twitter space the other day, and they were talking about dark energy and dark matter, and they said like out of like the four forces in the universe, the only one that actually affects it is gravity. So like light and stuff doesn't even affect it at all.
Well, because we what we think of is dark energy as we call it. We think of everything as energy, yet there is no electrical current, right? There is no energy that we can pick up from dark matter. And so it's literally just a word to encompass something we just don't understand at this point, right? Because dark matter, dark energy, what is dark matter? It's just dark to us, right? Of thought, because we just don't see it. Um, but this goes to, like I was saying before, I lost what I was gonna say. But when Einstein was developing the theory of relativity and using the speed of light, right, in his thoughts, on this determination, I think he was bound at that time by the computational ability to observe theoretical science of quantum computation. And so I think if he had quantum computers in his day, the things that he would have been able to discover from what we think of this quantum realm or quantum mechanics by itself, would have been ground shaking for us today. Although, and I think we have plenty of smart physicists today that will discover things, nonetheless.
And one another theory I have, and this is kind of esoteric, but about the Fermi paradox, is that we don't really understand what life is, and that what we think of ourselves as living organisms might be an illusion. And I mean, I don't want y'all to think I'm like way out or whatever, but like we know that we're trapped within the parameter of our consciousness, and everything is that we perceive is the way our conscious mind interprets it, not the way it is. And that could be very true about even um, what's alive and what isn't. And um, you know, it may be that everything is alive in a sense, but we just can't see that because we're stuck in an evolutionary pattern that doesn't allow us to perceive outside this box. I know that's a weird one to say, but that may be why we're not there. I mean, there may be a lot of life. Maybe everything's alive. I mean, and we're just not getting it, or we just can't see it because one kind of basic example of looking at it this way is like um, your eyes don't really see, your brain sees, and they've definitely proven that. I mean, so like your eye, I mean your eyes bring in the light, but your brain interprets what the image is, and the brain interprets the image however the hell it wants. There was a thing that was kind of going viral on here where this dude is standing in the water with an alligator, and it's like he just knows how to move so the alligator won't bite him. And he puts his hand in a certain area, and the alligator's like snaps, and then he just moves back, and the alligator doesn't know he's there. I mean, and so like we're going to have not the same limitations as an alligator, but compare we're also biological creatures, and we're limited to what we can perceive at this point. But that's another thing that's really exciting about AI, is that AI doesn't have to be stuck in the same biological niche that we're in, and therefore it can show, has the potential, I believe, to show us reality as reality is, not as we interpret it somehow. So like it's some exciting. The potential is just so exciting, and it just makes me just want to say how important it is that we just don't fucking kill ourselves. Pardon my language.
No, it's very important, Norm, and I enjoyed all of your words. So thank you very much for coming and speaking. Shellfish, go ahead, please. Oh, and Dazzling. Before you, Shellfish, I'm sorry, Dazzling. You had your hand up, man. Did you still have a question?
Oh no, I actually didn't raise my hand, but I was just going to jump in there before when he started talking about dark matter, because one thing that got me really excited quite a few years ago was that they are building like a physics lab about 3 hours from Melbourne in this really old gold mining town. So they're basically utilizing the old gold mine there in this small town called Stall. And I've been out there before, and it's quite an interesting little town. But yeah, I'm not sure what the development is with that, because they're looking at trying to do experiments and into looking into dark matter and stuff like that. So I know that the development got slowed down during COVID and stuff like that. But yeah, I was. Because when they first kind of proposed the idea, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I'm going to go do computer science and do data science and then go over there and work for him in this beautiful little town." And I mean, that kind of never eventuated, but yeah, I'll look them up, and I'll chuck them their site in the bubble, and yeah, you can suss it out and see what they're up to.
And also, thank you for reminding me I haven't put any videos in the bubble. I'm going to go grab a couple of them. Go ahead, Shellfish. Thank you for raising your hand.
Of course. Warmth, what you were talking about actually kind of reminds me of when I would get busted from my mom when I was younger. And she would say, oh, there's your perspective, like your experience, my experience, and then the truth. So it's going to be kind of like the same thing, experiencing other people's experience through, AI and virtual reality as it becomes more available. Seeing, I think, graduations and anything else through other people's eyes, or their through their lenses, right? So it's going to give us a more complete truth to reality, I think.
Other species as well.
Absolutely.
Hey, Shellfish, I'm just gonna say something. That sounds to me like your mom was very, very onset on the whole string theory, my man. Because the whole point that she was saying is the reality of literally string theory. Regardless if you want to simplify it like that, but it's just how unifying forces they all connect to each other, you know. So there's also vibrating strings of energy. That's what literally the presence that mom was giving you, string theory, just simplify for a child.
I highly doubt that that was her intention, but I will let her know that she was she was teaching me quantum physics.
Did you bring up string theory, Jay?
Yes, I did, bro. String theory up, yes, sir.
Oh, very interesting. I was thinking about bringing it up too. But there's a video that I've watched a few times recently. Talking about should physicists dump the thought of string theory in quantum mechanics, and I think it's a very relatively interesting theoretical science. Now, it gives us this roof to try and prove such a thing that we'd need to have enough energy output computational wise that the entire universe takes to exist. And so, we may never be able to theoretically see the strings of this possible multiverse paradox that exists subatomically, but it leaves the potential to try and do tests that could theoretically assume this would be a relative possibility. Now, I think one of the most interesting things, though, about string theory is that when you start talking about the possibility of it existing and how it would exist, you get left with the subatomic realm that in the third dimension, the dimension that we perceive ourselves to exist in, is actually not enough dimensions for a theory like string theory to play out mathematically. And so it actually ends up being you need 10 dimensions, and one of them, an included one, 11th, being time. And so, we can perceive ourselves, I think, to exist in, or perceive to see realization of reality in the third dimensional states, but we possibly exist in these multi-dimensional states all at the same time, and time being only relative to us in this third dimensional state.
You know that experiment where they explain why they consider gravity to be the weakest of the four forces, and it's because matter has to travel through different dimensions. Has anyone ever seen that?
Sorry, can you say that again, Warmth? I got a text message.
So there's an experiment where they they consider and I don't really understand why gravity is considered the weakest of the four forces, but it is. And if you know why, you can tell me that, because I don't know why. But they said the reason why gravity is because they say it's because it has to go through other dimensions to get to this dimension, and it entropies, every step of the way, loses a little bit of its juice. um they explained it by putting water on, and you watch the water go through and a little bit drips off here and there. I mean, I saw it on one of those pop TV shows, but pop science television. But it was pretty interesting. But two, one thing I thought about is, like, they always talk about the further dimensions as if they're smaller, which I know you can't really think of it that way because they're dimensions and we don't understand what they are. But, like, could a dimension be larger than I mean, does every dimension has to be into the micro, in the go, get, as things get smaller, you find different dimensions, or could it be expansive and larger than what we perceive? I, I don't have the. I guess we just don't. It's hard to have the language to talk about this correctly. But
Yo, Warm, can I get my thought on that? Can you imagine if Gravity is the weaker one of those forces, but the only reason why we cannot see the other forces is because we don't have a tool that is giving us enough accurate measurement of all these other forces because they're so strong. Can you imagine that?
Well, what about a thought? Like a single person can have a thought, but it can spread and it could become greater. So, I mean, it could be pretty expansive.
But how can you measure your thought? How strong is your thought? That's a thing of string theory. Like we may not know because we don't have a way to measure them correctly.
Yeah, because theoretically, what you're trying to do is push to the smallest dimensional um, unit of account that could possibly exist for us to experience. And just like Warmth said, with the thought of entropy, the amount of energy that it would take to prove the at least string of existing would theoretically take the same amount of energy that we have that is of reality of existence. And so, thinking about computational irreducibility, or this term that Stephen Wolfram has crowned, right? The To know like what the end of time would be, we would theoretically need to go through time, and so it would take all of the energy that all of time will take to be able to know that possible theoretic for with a great certainty. It's this force that in a sense holds us back because of the amount of energy that we think that it will take to prove something like that. But nonetheless, like I said, we can try and prove small defining factors like multi-dimensional states that can kind of help us uh, theorize that string theory be true. I don't know why it will not let me bring you up NY. It just keeps saying um, there was an error adding NY Koki. I don't know. Um, oh no, didn't let me up.
Shellfish, I think it's interesting that you said thought because I was going to say, and I mean, I don't understand string theory, but I was going to say that maybe, the vibrations they say or the strings is consciousness. And I said this in another group when I was talking with Death Ranger about that the the smallest form of matter or the core of matter might be consciousness. And and that's a theory that ties in with panpsychism. And I don't think panpsychism is at all ridiculous because we don't understand consciousness and it's as good a theory as any at explaining it. Doesn't mean it's true, but I just think it has a like to me it feels likely for whatever that's worth. But when you say thought, that like people do say it is consciousness. I don't know if that really means the strings and the vibration, but like people do say that could be the absolute, bottom core of matter when we get below quarks and whatever else is down there, the God particle thing and all that. Uh, so that's that.
I love this conversation today.
Yes, I'm very much so enjoying it. I'm glad I changed the topics above. Although, going back to your thought, Shellfish, about thought. Um, this is an observation of of what I would call strong force, right? The electromagnetic charge that you are creating through the vibration of your thought or your manifestation of vibration. You push this intent through to others, and based off of that they have then a representation based on their identity and perceived understanding of it, a reaction. And so, yeah, I think that's a good example of it. But um gravity itself, the reason for this, Jay, being what we would call the weakest force, is because it's the force that we still don't actually understand. We know it's there. We know there is a binding by the field that is created from this electromagnetism of these subatomic particles all interacting with each other's, break it all the way down to bosons and fermions that then turn into quarks, and then protons and neutrons, and then on top of that you have the electrons, and together with this you create an atom and then a nucleus, or sorry, a nucleus and then an atom. I mean, the 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 relative understanding that we at least have of it at this moment doesn't allow us to really pinpoint what we think gravity is. We also have this subatomic particle we call a graviton, which we think is the subatomic particle that is actually what's binding these particles together, that we just can't see at the moment. But it's a big question, and I've spoken to some people who go into like plasma and then liquid fields, and everything is liquid. And when we talk about even string theory, but particle physics, and you break into outer space, you start breaking away from particles, because particles are easier to explain of the binding of the way that everything interacts with each other, and you start looking at fields. And then when you start describing everything that exists in these different fields of patterns of electromagnetic frequencies, string theory becomes much more plausible as, okay, that makes a lot more sense, because it's these fields of different patterns interacting with each other. I did not see who had the hand up there first, but NY, you have not spoken yet. If you would like to speak, and then Shellfish and Warmth.
Yeah, man. Thank you for letting me talk. Sorry for cutting the line.
No, don't be sorry.
But isn't gravity a reactive force?
Well, this is what we think, right? But there's no way to prove that it's a reactive force. What if gravity is the means of binding all of these subatomic particles together? And in itself, if Warmth is correct, and his assumption that everything is consciousness, which I truly do believe also, then consciousness itself is forcing the binding of these subatomic particles. And so reality is literally a creation of our own mind, just like Warmth said. But how do we prove this? It's we don't have a way to yet.
But you kind of lost me there. But going back to what I was saying, I think it's difficult to measure gravity, because, like I was saying, it's one of the most reactive forces that we have. Like, gravity impacts me different than it impacts you, and we could be standing right next to each other. So just with that alone, it's really difficult to come up with an accurate measurement. I believe what we need to develop are more like scale like kind of balances that kind of have like a plus negative. I forgot what that terminology is, but they have the plus negative built into the ratio, so that you always have that leeway for if you go a little bit left or if you go a little bit right. I don't know, but I could be wrong.
Are you talking more like aerodynamic devices?
Maybe more of like I think of like a counter vertigo. You know how people get vertigo when they lose balance and they're not really sure of their positioning? Maybe like these are signs that, oh, we need to start developing something so that this eventually goes away. And that maybe that eventually leads to more reactive studies, and then we can kind of understand gravity. I don't know. That's how I could see it. That's how I could see it. I could be completely wrong.
We understand at least how it is, the terminology we use, right? Gravity, to try and describe the volume being filled between two different objects of space and time. And so between these electromagnetic fields that exist, the forces that bind between them is what we think, right? This binding is gravity. And so it's really like this volume between the difference of these spaces. And so we can theoretically say, well, if we are at this point in time and space and we have all of this volume of these atomic signatures, what will gravity be? We can predict that. The question, though, is
is what the hell is gravity? Like, we know it's there, we can interact with it, we can do things with it, but why is it there? It's just me, right? And that's theoretical mathematics and physics, right? It's like the question of not only what it is, but why is it there? And if we can figure out why it's there, you can underlyingly control how it's there to a greater capacity. And Warmth, please go ahead, and then Shellfish.
I thought Shellfish was first, but if you see,
You may be correct.
I lost my train of thought. So by all means, hopefully you'll say something that'll trigger it.
Okay. I wanted to say that I was glad that you said that gravity isn't well understood, Death, because I went through a kind of like a period where I got really obsessed with trying to understand gravity. And so, like, they say, okay, there's something massive bends space time, and then the other object is just moving straight. And actually, it's actually just moving straight, but because space time is bent, it pulls the it pulls the object towards the massive the objects are pulled together, or the smaller object is pulled to the massive object, or however you want to look at it. But the thing about that is really, if you break it down, and I'm not smart enough to really break it down for people, but if you really start looking at it, that's a circular argument. That's really just saying gravity exists because gravity exists. That explanation is unsatisfactory. And so I'm absolutely convinced that they don't know, at least on everything I ever read that tries to explain gravity, and watching it on shows and whatever on YouTube leads me to the conclusion they don't know what the hell causes gravity. That's what I've concluded by trying to figure out what it is. And um, I'll say something else about gravity too, is when they say it's the weakest force, you know, but I I would like to ask a physicist this, because um, gravity never gives up. So, like, um, I kind of wonder, like, I mean, are you taking into consideration that, like, the um, nuclear forces will someday become obsolete through through the process of entropy? Yeah, but a massive object will still have gravity. It's like, um, I don't know. I just think when it's all said and done, that like maybe gravity is the champion of these forces. And I also think that that is a possible argument that the universe will expand and then contract. And it may happen over and over again. So I don't rule that theory out. Like, I know right now it's real popular that the universe is just going to expand forever, and then everything's going to rip apart, and it'll end in entropy. But I think it could very possibly expand to a point, and then contract, and it could just be raw dog gravity, just our old buddy, that wins out in the end. And to me, that would also explain how, like, all the matter of the universe existed in something smaller than an atom before the Big Bang, because it contracted, to another universe that already, existed, expanded, and then contracted down. But I'm definitely not qualified to make these theories. But
Yeah, Warmth.
just thinking about crap,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
these are my
That's a
conclusions.
cool theory and stuff you're thinking about. And I always thought the same thing
No,
too about
those are valid
things
points.
blowing up. But with that NASA Twitter space I was on the other weekend, they were talking
Do
about how they're actually like recording
does
the
anybody
stars going back and forth. And so they actually said, like, how explosion goes off and then things kind of slow down after that. With our universe, it's actually speeding up, and they cannot explain that, which is really, really, really weird.
It is weird as shit. I mean, and I've heard that too, and and you know, it's I think it has something to do with dark energy or forces, but it also suggests to me that maybe light speed isn't a hard speed limit, even though they say it's not the same thing because it's not moving through the universe, it's the expansion of the universe. But I think like the expansion of the universe can or does transcend the speed of light. So I'm not positive, you know, so Google everything before you repeat it and find out, but that's what I think, you know. And so you know, it changes the way we look at physics, you know, or should look at physics, because it absolutely is an incredible thing that 14 billion years ago there was an explosion, and it's still gaining momentum, you know.
Yeah, and
That's crazy.
recently, Warmth with the James Webb Telescope, they have tried to prove that the new theory is it's actually 28 billion years old. They think it's twice as old. The universe is twice as old as we theoretically thought it was mathematically beforehand. Um, but still, you know, I really liked the thought of breathing. I mean, it's exactly what you said, right? Expanding, contrasting. It's breathing. Uh, the yin, and you start thinking about qi and qigong, and these studies that we've had around our cultures. I shouldn't say culture, but traditions for a very long time. It makes a lot of sense that we may even have understood that this is what the universe actually is doing, not why it's doing it, but this is what it is doing. And so we have truly been on this discovery train of figuring out why it does what it does, and so we can try and participate in it doing what it's doing.
But but
GDO,
even
welcome up, man.
hey, what's up? And I love this type of conversation. But even like it kind of gets a little bit more mind fucky here. Is like, yeah, when you're breathing as an individual, you're doing your own expanding and contracting. So yeah, a singular universe maybe as a whole may be expanding and contracting, but remember, there's other individuals outside of ourselves as well, right? So is there other universes that are simultaneously contracting and expanding as well? Just like, I'd like to think every person is their own universe in a way sometimes too. So it's kind of crazy how it all intertwines and interlinks, and different pacings of expansion and contraction is happening all over the place, even within this one singular universe that we're in.
I mean, every atomic state of a moment can create a train of infinite possibilities of moments that could theoretically exist afterward. And so, the multiverse, the simultaneous.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is when you start getting into the theoretics of the multiverse.
Yeah.
These other dimensional states being able to possibly exist on top of our dimensional state at the same moment of us existing, it becomes much more plausible, because we're not just
Right.
talking about the theory of relativity, but we're talking about quantum mechanics interacting with them.
So
Yeah, exactly.
my fault. I'm sorry. Yeah, so does it make sense to you guys that gravity would be closer to magnetism than anything else? If you take into account, like, we did have these multiple dimensions and multiple universes that consisted of similar materials, and if like we're inhaling and they're exhaling at the same time, maybe there comes a point in existence where it becomes a synchronization, and there's like just a ginormous expansion. Like, I don't know, I kind of see gravity, like I said before, kind of tied up with magnetism.
Right.
Well,
And
sorry,
that
go
that
ahead.
no problem. That magnetism is attraction, right? So it's when you're in the atoms that are attracted to a certain other set of atoms, right? That's what causes the magnetism that you're speaking of here.
Magnetism
So
can also push too.
Right.
Well, the
No, good stuff.
thing, though, that atoms that are pushing are also pulling, technically, because for an atom to exist, there's a proton and a neutron, or a positive and a negative. And so there is always this kind of push-pull relationship going on subatomically, which is so interesting to think, because every 7 seconds that goes past, you are a completely different atomic simulation of structures of chemical bindings. And even to the cellular level, every 7 years, all of the cells that exist in your body right now will be completely new cells. Comparably, it's this sense of organization and energy, and the way that these patterns interact with each other is quite fascinating, for sure. Dazzling, though, you got your hand up. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, the other day, Espo Espo was talking about. He asked this question quite a lot, actually, of like, where does the soul come from? And he asked if if you were to clone somebody, like, where would that soul come from? And then we're kind of chiming in about, because I've grown up with the kind of idea of reincarnation. So I kind of brought to the table, well, if we're reincarnating, this soul, I guess, from this body to another body, well then, with the population of the planet, now, once there was 1 million people on this planet, now there's 7 billion people on this planet. Like, where did all those other souls come from? And when I walked away from that conversation, I was kind of thinking about it, and like, I was thinking about the idea of, this kind of energy structure that brings all these atoms, right, of my avatar together, right? Because people were asking about, do trees have souls? Do animals have souls? And, other things, if you want to take it out there and go really wild, do other planets and stuff have souls, right? And I was kind of thinking about it along the lines of, this energy structure that we can't see, right? That's in that kind of dark matter realm, within that, within that gravity space, right? That holds you together. And when your body dies, it leaves this structure and then flows into, say, the growth of a tree, right? Or that energy can split and then grow into, something else, right? Or it can go to anywhere else in the universe and be part of anything else, right? And what I'm getting to is, like, I guess what the really annoying part for us is, us understanding that there is that transfer of energy that's happening, but we can't detect it. We just can't bridge that gap to trying to, understand how it works in a way. But yeah, it's extremely fascinating to think about.
Well, I can try and explain it in my own understanding of what I believe to be what's truth, and this and the means of the soul, which we articulate as this word to identify, I think, a particular person and their identity, right? I think when we talk about our soul, we kind of really just we're talking about our identity, right, in ourselves. And I believe every single atom that exists is me at a different point in time and space. You are me existing at a different point in time and space, and I am you. And so, why do I believe this? Because I believe every single energetic structure to be of the same nature. In the end of the day, when you break down atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons and you quarks and you break it down, and we have this inevitable electromagnetic frequencies, right? This energy. And in the end of the day, if everything is energy, then everyone is energy. And if the source of the energy is the universe and we are part of the universe, then all is one and one is all. And so, when you talk about soul, right, I really think we articulate our personal identity. And it's like, well, where does that go? Well, that rests with the decaying structure of the energy that I think maybe that you give out to, like, the trees, like you kind of put it when you get put in the ground, and maybe there's some subatomic part of entropy that we know the energy leaves some of the body and the brain, right? When you pass away, there's a large amount of input of energy in the brain, in the form of DMT chemicals. Well, right, where does that go? Huge question. Could be a multi-dimensional question. Could be a multiversal question. Or, you know, you could theoretically just place it. It's everywhere because it always was everywhere.
Well, if you consider like at the subatomic level that things are kind of indestructible, or that like energy eventually is just at a certain point, if you just keep going breaking it down, it's just an indestructible matter. Where it goes is every individual piece of atom that is a part of you probably goes in separate directions, just like an individual person or individual thing has its own path in a life. Every individual speck of an atom probably goes in its own little journey. So like, let's say when you pass or when you die, the supposed energy, there's physical energy, right? The physical body that you were inhibiting, that energy breaks down, decomposes, and all those atoms like eventually break up and go in different directions. And then whatever, you know, the supposed energy that's within us that we call a soul, even though I like to think everything is soul, all things are part of the same atomic structure that is indestructible and is ultimate light. You know, but at the same time, it's made up of a lot of tiny, tiny, tiny little subatomic type of things. And I think all those individual ones break up in their own different directions, but they collide with others, right? That's what makes up the universe, is the collisions of all these atoms and concentrations in certain different directions, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it's this harmonious pattern structure of energy interacting with energy. And so just like you said, DLT, my thoughts are, you know, in this sense, if you start talking about a cybernetic being, right? Maybe some sort of structure that then formulates its own identity. Well, that is its right. If you want to identify that as a soul, I don't think that's wrong, but I don't think that changes the fact that it was always the same energy that consisted of you, right? For every atom, for any molecular or mechanic device to exist, it's atomic structures that have assimilated that may identify as a different representation of what you look at in the mirror is no different in the end of the day of the resonance of energy. So, you know, I would identify that with as just a different being. And if it's intelligent, then just a different intelligent being. Or other intelligences, I like to state it.
Did we just figure out life?
Ah, the answers are so easy, yet it's interesting in the relativeness of being able to have others be able to experience that experience. Because in my thoughts of when I think about what is the reason for life itself or existence, it is truly existence. It's experience. Just to experience existence is the meaning of existence. And in that, every single atom is so significant because every single particle, every single field or string that makes up the strings that make up the reality um, is part of this play that we are consisting reality of observing.
Now, is the XRP ledger going to tokenize every atom that exists?
It's an interesting question. How many atoms do exist?
About 1 million drops per atom, I think.
Bro, that was funny. Holy shit.
Death didn't deny that.
I mean, we joke, but you never know.
Well, we better be careful because there might be securities.
Our very existence is a security.
Man, we had such a good time. We were talking about quantum physics, string theory, traveling to space and time, and we go back to the ledger. That's how we know we're sick puppies. Good job, people.
That was great. I'm gonna grab a couple videos that I'm putting up top. One was from Michio Kaku, who is a quantum physicist. He was speaking. He was the one that was speaking on string theory. He really breaks it down really nice into the multidimensional states. and why we are closer than ever to technically trying to prove string theory rather than being farther away. And if you look at it from a relative sense of time, in the early '60s when string theory was derived, people actually quit becoming physicists because they did not want to be known as a crazy person because of the theories at the time that were starting to appear, and one of them being string theory. So it's really cool to see today that it's actually popular in theoretical physics. Oh, also, I did look up earlier, touching back on the LK99, the difference between why this is able to be a room temperature superconductor, and so it was copper lead phosphorus that was then combined with oxygen, and this allowed for what we theoretically think to have a room temperature material that could act as a superconductor, and this just means it can conduct electricity at a astronomically higher rate than the materials we use today without overheating, or at least needing a tremendous amount of cooling supplies materials. Here, because you start talking about quantum processors and quantum computers, and one of the things that we touched on before was FTL, right, or faster than light technology. I think it's really going to come down to having the ability for quantum processors to exist in room temperature states and extremely cold states, being able to communicate with each other. The computational systems that would need massive amounts of energy and juice to be able to produce computational algorithms and execute upon them, existing in these superconductor states in these liquid cooled um, bath states, and that kind of computational system being able to then articulate a communication of electromagnetic frequencies using algorithms and computation to communicate with a solid state photon chip. And so what I mean by this is we know photons are light, proven in quantum computation. Qubits could either exist in zeros and ones and zeros at the same exact time. So all three states being able to theoretically exist. If we are able to have computational systems that could be a chip that could just exist on your phone, right? A solid state photonic chip that could then have the photons altered in it from a quantum computational system, you could increase the computation that could be done by a quantum processing chip in your phone while still being able to have the utilization of such a system. And so I think when we go into faster than light technologies, or truly like warp drives or teleportation, I think the ability for having a quantum computational system to interact here on Earth and on Mars faster than we think light can even travel, to be able to assimilate your atomic structures from one means of location in time to the next in space, is something that we would need something like a quantum computer or a system to do, right? How are we going to mathematically assimilate every single chemical bonding of cellular material that exists exactly where it existed in your body prior to you entering the warp drive, or this means of beaming you somewhere else, right? Beam me up, Scotty. And I think these systems are essential for this to be able to be done.
And I think ChatGPT or AI can help us with that. Ask him that question, see what happens.
Yeah,
How
large
can we
language
do it?
models are definitely very important when it comes to these different application tool sets that we could use in the not only long term but near term future, to be able to have predictable outcomes of all of this different computational systems. Pair a large language model with a natural language model like Wolfram Alphas, and you all of a sudden you have a cybernetic being, truly, with if you're able to have enough electrical input and the neuromorphic chip design behind it. I mean, very, very similar to the identity of how we process things today. But Dazzling, go ahead, man.
Yeah, man. Shelley, you brought data being transferred through wormholes to my attention the other day, so thank you for that. And I'm kind of thinking along the lines of that going back to the kind of stream of consciousness and like connecting to that other side that of away from the physical atoms and stuff that we see. I'm wondering if like the consciousness has the ability to travel through these types of wormholes, let's say to other minds, right? And the reason I say this is because like sometimes you're standing there and you're maybe having a conversation with someone, and out of the blue they'll be like, "Oh my god, I was thinking that too." And I know we're kind of getting into like telepathy and stuff like that. But just on what you were saying then about using quantum computers to kind of transfer data to Mars and all that kind of stuff. I mean, could we use it? Would it be theoretically possible to transfer data through wormholes to other planets that we might live on one day?
Correct. And so we would call it a wormhole because the theoretical identifier of us viewing the information would be beyond our viewership, right? Because we would be, right, a wormhole or a multi-dimensional shaping box, you could really call it, right? You forcing yourself through what we would perceive to be the dimension of time, through different dimensional states. Yeah, I mean, it's, a little bit of predicting the future in quotations, but that's exactly how I see these computational systems being able to communicate with each other over long distance.
And you were bringing up about like a situation where, like, for example, something happens and both people think the same thing at the same time, and they're like, "Oh my God, I was thinking that too." If you break it down, I feel like, okay. I mean, it gets pretty far though, right? If we're like just an accumulation of all these atoms and then you start saying we're an accumulation of all these experiences, it makes sense when two people or two bodies are coexisting in a similar space and an experience happens to them where they both arrive to a similar conclusion of thought, and then they say, "Oh my God, I was thinking that. How did you know I was thinking that?" Or "How did you know I would say that?" Or certain things like that. It's because the life experience, and chances are that you have similar exposure to other things that would arrive you to, like, for example, like let's say something happens from a scene of like that reminds you of a scene of a movie, and it's a popular movie, and the person you're with is your friend. Well, you already have like shared life experience with them where they kind of know you well and you know them well. And then you see a certain situation happen and you go, "Oh, this is like that movie." And the other person goes, "Oh yeah, I was just about to say that. How did you know I was going to say that?" It's because, like, just like how we're an accumulation of atoms and experiences and things like that. That's how you arrive to something that seems like as if it's spiritual, but there is actually a way that you've kind of just been not groomed, but with the people that you're with, you've all had like a kind of common level experience to arrive to similar conclusions when you have a certain experience happening. Like, for example, when people go visit a psychic and the psychic automatically goes, "Are you thinking of a loved one right now?" And then most likely you'll say yes, because the reason you're going to a psychic sometimes is because you're having like an existential thing about life or death, and maybe something of somebody's death has happened in your life that's affecting you and making you think more spiritually. It's I hope that you guys understand what I'm saying, like with that, like how you can explain that there's like this telepathy going on, but you can actually just be arriving it to how like two bodies that are coexisting in the same space arriving to certain conclusions.
No, I want to stick to it traveling through wormholes type of thing.
Oh no,
But
no,
no,
I
that
get you.
definitely makes sense.
You were bringing
Yeah.
telepathy there, but traveling through wormholes. I mean, um, what would you be saying? Like sending thoughts through a wormhole or data through a wormhole?
Data, yes. And
Well, yeah. No, sorry. Go, Death. Go.
yeah, it would be data. And so even if it's us theoretically using some sort of teleportation device, we would be breaking our assimilation down of energy into data. And there are some physicists that would say that everything that exists is data itself in some mathematical application. And so you could theoretically think of this. Now we call it a wormhole because we're pushing information through one place of time that is non-existent for us to interact with physically, and it's coming out another point of time, or time in space, I should say, really.
And to have access to this wormhole on either side, like if you're on one side of the wormhole sending data to the other side, both sides have to have at least some sort of common ground or similarity to each other that they're able to access this wormhole to begin with to transfer and receive this data.
Yeah, it would be quantum superposition. You have to know the exact atomic signature that's going to have the replication of of atomic reference at a different point in time and space. And so, yes, theoretically, you definitely know. You need to know of the interaction of the molecules you're interacting with, and how the outcome is going to be from a long distance perspective. This is actually where the difficulty comes into for the warp drive, right? You know, we theoretically have already proven we can build a electromagnetic field around a particular device. You know, if you go to like the Large Hadron Collider, right, they've created these electromagnetic fields from bashing these ions together in this large energy output. But it's like, how would you be able to point the direction of where you want to go and have the outcome that you want to see? That yeah, we're nowhere near, at least publicly, but definitely interesting.
Well said.
You brought up.
Well said, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting, and it's one of the most important aspects to the warp drive. It's like, if I press the button and we go into the warp drive, where's the outcome? Like, what's going to happen?
Exactly. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but I'm trying to relate it with how you can make something exist in one area and then all of a sudden it exists in another. For example, like we're living in an instantaneous world where we want everything as quickly as possible. So like you're having delivery within the same day sometimes on certain products that you order. I'm curious, like, let's say you're buying, something that's like a collectible, but you're trying to have it transported to you instantly at your home. What's the, like, is there a way that you can maybe even 3D print it, like break it down from the sender? The sender breaks down their product in like a 3D printed way, and then it gets 3D printed at the receiver's home or something like a 3D printer would have to exist in order for like instantaneous settlement and sending of an actual real life object.
That's actually, it was an interesting thing. I know Shellfish likes the 3D printing a lot. I would think this, the cost of the materials, because it's like, what are you 3D printing? It would be your printer. Maybe you have to do the cost of materials, but maybe you can like purchase the right to like, oh, I think that's a really cool device, and so I purchase the right to build it, and so I get like a it puts a patent number into it, or a serial number, so this device is this particular number, and it's like, I bought in the one-time use to create this maybe material. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I like the thought of it. I haven't actually heard anybody say anything like that. Shellfish, though, you had your hand up, and then Dazzling.
I think Dazzling was first. I'll wait my turn.
No, go.
Yeah. So, that always comes back to like my thought of like being able to download your consciousness, and say we had a 3D printer already on Mars, and you could just have like a 3D printed body of G on Mars, and we wouldn't have to actually travel like through like this 6 or 2 year whatever trip. Like you could just send the data and then be there. Like, but would you even want your body? Would you just want a robot like body that you could walk around with? Because then you would have your body, or your avatar that you could walk around with, that wouldn't have to deal with gravity or like just the environment, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't even know where to go with that, but I see what you're saying is just when you're basically putting consciousness as data, and then it's they say in the future your identity is the payment in a lot of these like payment focused DLT, CBDC type of stuff, right? So if our identity is the payment, that means they're starting to try to do something like that where you can bridge your consciousness with technology, and then like you said, travel multiple worlds through that, and then you're just abandoning your body altogether. But how would you do that? Like, would that be like a matrix type of thing where you're just like in this like little goo egg and you're just plugged all the hell up, like eyes, mouth, all your
Mikhail's
senses?
is it what? How do you say his name? Mikiao. I always say his name
Because
wrong.
I guess what we
Michio
even
Kaku.
define what we
Mich.
I get
Thank
I
you.
guess what we even define as consciousness is how we're defining our senses and like the sense reality that we have. Like we call that consciousness because we're aware of what we touch, see, feel, and taste, right? So if you're able to do that, if you're able to put like a body sensor thing that gives you the exact same experience of the feeling like you're in a human body, then yeah, you can print your body over in Mars and then go in and out in between Earth and Mars, controlling these bodies just like you go in and out of your email accounts like on
Gee,
Google or something.
think about like how limited we are in our dimensional space. Like the quantum computers can experience multi dimensions. So can you imagine experiencing everything all at once, in that realm? It would be mind blowing. We can't even fathom the shapes that are able to be conceived in those other dimensions. So having our consciousness, which Chiao, but I don't know, I always mess up his name. He was saying within the next like 15 years that we would be able to download our consciousness to the cloud.
I wouldn't be
And I know,
surprised because I believe technology is evolving at such a rapid rate that human consciousness won't be able to keep up with it eventually. It'll just be like a flash of white light before our eyes eventually in terms of the evolution of like think about it with nanotechnology and everything. Imagine if they're able to like those small little robots are able to start creating a dimension like at the cellular level being paired up with things like how that can transform your reality and perception. But yeah, you guys have your hands raised, so I'm going to stop. But great stuff, Shellfish.
Yes, an interesting topic to talk about nanotechnology and nanobites. I'll bring that up in a minute. Dazzling, you had your hand up. Then I think it was Warmth and Bambros. Welcome to the space, man.
Yeah, movie Everything Everywhere All at Once is a fascinating movie. Very, very hilarious. I highly recommend it. But yeah, you kind of given me the movie Avatar type of vibes, where you just kind of plug yourself in and bang you, and then off you go into, doing whatever you're doing. So, but yeah, I was going to say about the 3D printer before. I remember 10 years ago, I'm reading articles and, they're all saying that, every household will basically have a 3D printer in 10 years. And I mean, that 10 years has gone by. Not every household has a 3D printer. I mean, they were kind of looking at it like, just your standard printer, right? Eventually, they made their way into everybody's homes. And yeah, they were basically saying that, every house would have a 3D printer one day. I'm still waiting for that. But you kind of just bringing that up before, you kind of just made me think that, that's still going to happen because there's a really good use case to kind of put one in everyone's home. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that.
It'll be like the new age microwave.
I think Bamber was before me, so
No, it's okay. Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Go
Thank
ahead.
well, I was going to say briefly when I think it was Dazzling when you were talking about the two people having synchronous thoughts. It made me think of menstrual synchrony, which is definitely real. And, the best theory they have is just that, it's caused by pheromones. I mean, and smells are just atoms floating from one place to another. So, whether that can be, happen with thought, because really, I mean, at least, I take a materialistic view. I mean, thought is just atoms collected in a certain way, or material collected in a certain way. And I also believe that we're not super far off from having the type of image resonance to be able to look at the brain and understand, what the thoughts are. So like you'll see the movement in the brain, how the neurons move with such clarity when there's such high definition in future technology that takes images of the brain, that then your thought will be can be immediately transposed through to an electronic device. And then when you think about, like, if you want to be interconnected, it could basically be just something like Bluetooth, and then two people could be, telepathically united just through technological means. And it's I mean, it's a ways off, but it's not impossible to imagine. It's not ridiculously far off with the technology that we have now.
Oh, I think we're closer to something like that than most know for sure. Yeah, Ben Burrows, though, please go ahead, man.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, I love the conversation. I wanted to add about going back to the black holes. I have here in my notes from quantum physics, it says, two black holes that are quantum entangled will have a bridge between them. These bridges are known as ER bridges, or Einstein-Rosen bridges, or wormholes. So it makes me think wormholes only exist between two quantum entangled black holes or singularities. So not all black holes are quantum entangled, but if two black holes are quantum entangled, they will have a ER bridge between them, or a wormhole between them. So what I'm thinking is, imagine far in the future if we could manually quantum entangle the points in space that we want. But what that means is we might have to create a singularity in that space, in the point of entrance and the point of exit. But let's say that I'm far away from Earth and I'm near a black hole. Who knows? Maybe one day we might be able to quantum entangle that black hole, to maybe we could create an artificial singularity closer to our solar system, but not close enough that it would affect us. But if you get what I'm saying, like we could the person that's far away from Earth could then just travel through the black hole and end up in the artificial singularity that we created closer to our solar system. Or who knows, maybe aliens already have that technology, that they can pick and choose where to travel to.
Yeah, and I would say, Ambrose, you would only need something that massive if you were trying to move something like the size of the Earth through something like that. When we think about quantum entanglement, what if every single atom is quantum entangled with every other atom that exists? And so instead of thinking of particles as separate particles that are bouncing around, we start thinking of fields. And all of these fields are interacting with each other, attached like nodes of a network, right? Interconnected. And so it really just comes down to the superposition of being able to interact with one atom, and then having the interaction of that atom formulate an interaction with another atom that is wherever you want it to be in space and time.
Again, to Michio Kaku, but in that book, The Physics of the Impossible, he says that he doesn't claim this. He just says it's possible. There's only one electron, and that that electron is everywhere and every time. I mean, he's not saying that he knows that or anything, but he says that's not impossible.
Well, I mean, this is my personal belief of what I think everything of reality is actually one electron or photon or one subatomic resonance of energy that is at a that exists everywhere at a different moment of time and space. And so every experience we have is just an assimilation of a different recognition of a different point of time and space. But the same energy makes up everything. It's actually the theory of quantum mystery. And so this one particular energy source is just vibrating at a different resonance, at a different frequency everywhere, and it creates the strings that create the fabric of chemicals and atoms that make up the reality that we experience, or at least perceive to experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure if every single particle in the universe has a particle that it's quantum entangled with. I'm not sure about that, but it is interesting. I'm now I want to look into that.
Yes, please do. Great lesson to teacher to learn from is Stephen Wolfram. He has a lot of explanations and interesting information on these things. I have a couple of the names I could give you that you might like for theoretical physics. I posted a video up top actually too. Um, Fermions and bosons might help explain a little bit too of the interactions between these, and to what we were speaking about earlier, all of these different possible atomic assimilations of different organic or mecha material. Life Beyond 2 and 3, I posted above. They're like 40 to 50-minute clips, more of a little video clip. Very well done. Something you want to watch, sit down in a dark room, maybe have like popcorn or something while you watch. It's really, really enjoyable. At least it was to me. Dazzling though, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say about what Warmth was saying before about the, transferring thought via like Bluetooth and stuff like that. I find that a very fascinating idea. It's like, can everyone just, send me your Wi-Fi address and I'll just airdrop everybody a thought. I really like that. But like before, because I really struggle with this, right? If I'm thinking for too long and, too much, I lose my train of thought. And you did that just before death. And so that kind of, technology would be fantastic, because then you could just basically grab the thought, you could line it up and then just revisit it whenever you needed to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're very close to that. I mean, you can even think about it with plants. We're very close to having electromagnetic frequencies being able to be read and then interpreted in an understandable, digestible language for us as humans, and then in computational forms of natural language models to communicate with animals and plants. And so, us being able to communicate with each other without the need for physical language, not very far off from that, in my opinion. But going back to something you said before, Bambros, about this entanglement between all particles. We have some of the tests that we've done at CERN where we look at the way that they've been able to create a black hole. Now, they've created a black hole that's 0.003 microns, and we've only been able to sustain it for almost 15 minutes. But with doing so, we've proved that breaking into an atom, in this particular instance, a hydrogen atom, can actually, if increasing the mass of it tremendous fold by the energy that could be being bashed into these particular atoms. I mean, we could theoretically create a black hole. The question then is if we can create a black hole from any atom, how do we know how to interact with other atoms? And this just goes into like what I was speaking about before with superposition. If we know that photons of light and energy is what makes up all of reality, then how do we interact with photons here that will then interact with photons there? And so, this thought of the warp drive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you see, if they're already able to create an artificial singularity, then we're on the right track, right?
Yeah, I don't like to personally at least use that word artificial, because I don't think anything is artificial. But yes, I believe us to be the singularity of our singularity, and for every singular moment that we have to believe that to be something of some significance as in a singularity, I think the experience is in the eyes of the beholder. And so, like, beauty in the eyes of the beholder. I think we each experience a singularity every single moment of our existence as we are the singularity itself.
But you know what I mean, right? By artificial, I just mean in the sense that it wasn't natural. It wasn't there already. We created it in the lab.
Yeah, we created it, correct? Yeah. I like to say manufactured or generated, because, you know, it's even the sense of like for atoms to be bound together in some sort of formulation, it was always atomically possible. It just wasn't what we were experiencing at this point in time at space. But it's like that could exist, say, in another galaxy or another place in space. You know, you think about all these really weird foreign materials that could possibly exist, and then that could have fallen onto planets, and then when organic life or mechanical life in the form of silicon grew and materialized, molecularized, it adapted with that material, and so it was just so different than what we could think of as being possible.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking here on some notes I have on something called BCS theory, Bardeen-Cooper-Schrieffer theory. It's a microscopic theory, and it kind of ties into what you were saying about the structure of the atoms, right? They form a lattice structure, and so I have here electrons are able to interact through phonons. Phonons are vibrations in the lattice. Yeah. No. Electrons are able to interact through phonons. Phonons are vibrations in the lattice. So that's crazy. You know, it's saying electrons do interact via vibrations. But who knows to what extent, you know, like, is it conscious? Is an electron conscious, you know?
Yeah, you know, well, so this is personal opinion, right? Because it's hard to say what consciousness is. I would say consciousness is a moment, right? We're not conscious. We have conscious thoughts or conscious moments. These moments of realization or awareness. And so the question is everything aware? My answer would be yes. I believe every single moment exists because it is to exist. And so if that is the reality of the situation, then if everything exists because it exists, then that would underlyingly mean something made it exist in that formulation, would be at least what I would consider conscious. And we're right at that 5:30 mark. I feel like I spoke a lot today, and I'm sorry if I spoke too much. But Dazzling Man, you got your hand up, and then we'll get some last words from everybody in the stage and close out.
No, you're good. I was actually supposed to leave for work half an hour ago, but I was just like so enthralled with this conversation. So stop it. But you know, this has been fantastic. Someone was saying the other day that electrons, they have studied the behavior of electrons and do believe that they do have some sort of conscious nature about them, which I found absolutely fascinating, because I didn't ever think that something, you know, like that actually could. So yeah, but I didn't get a source or anything with that information. So yeah.
Well, like the question is like, well, so why is every atom an electron, a neutron, and a proton? Why do electrons break down to quarks that are either up quarks or down quarks? And then why do those quarks possibly break into tetraquarks? It's like, it's the question of really why, right? And so if the answer is everything is conscious, well, then everything exists because of the intent of wanting it to exist. And so existence itself is for experience, or the intent of experience. At least that's my personal belief. But this was a incredible space, as it always is. I really thank you guys, the crowd that we had in here today. You guys were really excellent. The information that we spoke about in here, this is why I record these, because truly these we talked about and shared information and perspectives in here today. But something like 150 years, 200 years from now, an audio file just like this we have today, from something that we read from somebody like Pluto, 600 years ago, this is significance. This causes change in individuals, and sometimes when you change individuals, the hands of those individuals do that changes the reality of the society around them. And so, like always, I love you guys, and I thank everybody for coming today. I will be back tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time, and hope to see everybody then.
See you soon.
Not everybody.